Hello and welcome. My guest today is Robert E. Cartwright Jr., a nationally recognized plaintiff's trial lawyer and the second generation in a firm with more than 70 years of history. He is a former 2-hour, 53-minute marathoner, a Formula Ford and Formula Mazda driver who held track records at Thunderhill, and a mountaineer who has trekked Mount Everest. We are going to dig into how that mindset shows up in a decade-long legal battles and what most people misunderstand about product liability and mass torts, and how Robert thinks about growth, technology, and marketing in a world obsessed with AI and scale. Robert, welcome to the Growth Page.
Thank you, Alexei.
Now, you have quite a list of activities that you've done throughout your life. What was your motivation to get out of the office and do all of those things?
Well, you know, I think that when you're in a high stress, I guess there are certain people that are just motivated to do lots of things, and I was just always on the go. Whether it was, studying law or working hard. When I was younger, I put in long hours, and you needed that break. So if you went out and trained for an hour and a half for a marathon during the middle of the day, it kind of kept you going. I certainly provided a good mental and physical and emotional break. Or, the things like car racing, your mind is totally off of anything else in the world when you're driving at speed. You can't think of anything but the road ahead and the chess game that you're playing at 100 plus miles an hour, with the other cars. And so all the things that stress you out disappear for that period of time. And it's having a release, no matter what age you are, and different things are appropriate at different ages, but having some release when you're in a high stress profession, no matter what it is extremely important. And I think it helps you to be successful in life, to have those kind of things.
Did you have somebody that was your inspiration for trying those different activities, or this is something that you were personally drawn to when you were thinking about what to do to release the stress?
Well, I don't know. I was inspired by my father in many ways, but he just worked really long hours. He was totally absorbed in the profession of law and worked from morning till late at night and weekends, and was passionate about it, as I am.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't have a whole lot of other releases. And I grew up around a lot of those types of people. And for a lot of them, the release might be to go home and have a couple of cocktails, that kind of
Right.
thing, which I don't find to be particularly healthy, although I enjoy a drink now and then.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I just sort of fell into it. I liked the joy of running and getting your running is as much a mental and spiritual thing as it is a physical thing, or it used to be for me when I was able to do it well. So,
Mm.
as you get older, you have to find different things to do. So,
Right. But I think there has a lot, to be said about the mindset. I think younger generation, they are less keen to get out, and they might have maybe activity or two, but the things like trekking Mount Everest is there are less people doing them, which I think is a shame.
yeah, I find a lot of solace in nature. I find a lot of lessons to be learned in nature. I think although I'm a man of faith, I find a lot of spiritual centering in nature. And I think it's been helpful to me in my profession in understanding people and appearing before juries
Hmm.
and trying to find the truth of a case, trying to be honest with people, trying to do the right thing as you go through life. I think all of those things are really important for your long term success. There really ultimately are no shortcuts, and the shortcuts ultimately will get you in trouble. I think you just have to do what's required, do the hard work in order to be successful.
I think success could mean different things to different people. Your career, how have you defined success for your personal goals?
Well, I think some people define it by their income, by how much maybe they're earning. For me, success has been the process, the satisfaction I get from the process of helping people.
Mm-hmm.
of working on interesting cases for deserving clients, of getting justice for people that really need it, people that their lives have been turned upside down many times, or they've been severely injured, and they're never going to be
Mm-hmm.
quite the same. And being able to do something that makes things a little easier for them, makes their life just a little better. You can't undo a catastrophic injury or even a serious injury.
Mm-hmm.
But I certainly understand what it means, to not be able to run anymore, for example,
Right.
or to do the things you love to do, which give you satisfaction in life. And if that's taken away from you, then it seriously affects your life. And if you're not able to go out and earn a living to support your family or to take care of your children in the case of a mother or whatever it might be,
Mm-hmm.
being able to help those people is very satisfying. And you can earn a living doing it. You can do well by doing good. And there are a number of professions that allow that to happen. I think the law is one of them if you're in the
Mm-hmm.
right kind of law. The law can also be used to hurt people and I think to cause a lot of problems for people. It depends on what area of law you go into and how you're practicing it. So for me,
Certainly.
it's not just about income. It's about being able to do things that I enjoy doing, and I've been doing it a long time now, and I'm just as passionate now, and I love it as much as I ever did, if not more, as I've gotten older. So that says something about the profession.
Certainly. Out of all the cases that you've represented over the years, is there the one that stands out to you in particular as something that you were super proud of the work you've done and the difference you've made?
Well, I've had a number of very interesting cases and very challenging cases, and often, and I really enjoy product liability cases. If you work on race cars and you take apart motors, you kind of become mechanically minded, and
Mm-hmm.
I, I'm often looking at something that was a product failure, and so people injured by a dangerous product. Many of the cases we see today on product failures end up being a mass tort, like there's thousands of plaintiffs, like asbestos or a dangerous chemical or a dangerous drug. But in terms of, sort of the one-off case, like a vehicle defect,
Mm-hmm.
a dangerous roll cage or a dangerous power tool, those kind of things are very challenging because you're going against a very big corporation with endless resources and you're trying to prove that something was dangerous and their defense is, well, hey, millions of people have used it and not been injured. And so but you have to prove that, hey, this one this one
Mm-hmm.
failed because it's defective. And so I've had a number of really interesting product liability cases. I did one as a younger lawyer when I was younger that was very challenging. A number of the senior attorneys that I worked with said, don't take that case. Nobody can win one of
Mm-hmm.
those cases. And it was a gentleman who had cut his hand off with a radial arm saw.
Mm-hmm.
And the case was litigated for more than 10 years through appeal. It was ultimately 5 years before we were able to get to trial, and they offered $0 on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very difficult in terms of proving that a lower blade guard would have prevented an amputation. So our theory was that it needed to have a guard. A guard would
Mm-hmm.
have prevented an amputation and would have prevented this particular amputation had they had
Mm-hmm.
the lower blade guard that they sold as an optional piece of equipment. And
Right.
so we were ultimately able to show that it would have prevented the amputation. And then after we got the verdict, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, I worked with them for a few years, and they ultimately recalled 3 million of the saws and required them
Mm-hmm.
to put the lower blade guard on the saw instead of selling it for extra money,
Mm-hmm.
as a profit. So that was very satisfying because I felt that probably many hundreds of people did not have amputations that otherwise would have had the amputations. And we knew that many
Mm-hmm.
thousands of people had had amputations from the saw.
Right.
And so it was, hopefully, we prevented some of those in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very satisfying.
Certainly, it's a big impact, not just for the particular family in this matter, but it's for thousands of people that won't have to go through the same experience. You mentioned that it took a very long time, 10 years, to go through the process, which is a marathon, definitely not a
Yeah,
sprint.
yeah, two appeals and everything else. So it was quite a fight for a long time.
What's your advice to the younger lawyers today that might be thinking more in sprints, not in marathons, when it comes to the cases they select or the approaches they take to work, even just to run in their firms?
Well, for younger lawyers that want to go into a plaintiff tort practice, it's a different world than it used to be to some extent. You don't get to go out and try cases as frequently as we used to. There's a lot of roadblocks in the way.
Hmm.
It's become much more expensive to try a case. Case has to have a lot more value before you can try it. Uh, whole expense of trying a case with experts has gone up astronomically. My advice is, though, that it is a wonderful profession if it's what you're cut out to do.
Hmm.
If you are the type that is willing to take risk, sometimes substantial risk financially and your time and resources, and willing to work very hard and to do the work that's required and to continue to perfect your art
Hmm.
of advocacy and become a really good trial lawyer, I think it's extremely satisfying. And I would recommend it to anyone who feels inclined to want to do this kind of work. If you're just going into it thinking you're going to make a lot of money, there's a lot of lawyers I know that do what I do that don't make a tremendous amount of money. There's a handful that make a lot,
Hmm.
but the vast majority make, they make a living at it, but it's not like they're getting rich. And so
Right.
you can make more money elsewhere, but you
Mm.
may not get the satisfaction and a lifetime of being able to do things that are interesting and you're constantly learning. Being able to do something where you're always learning something new is just not that many things you can do anymore where it's that interesting and that challenging for your whole life. So
Certainly.
I would recommend it for someone who's inclined that way.
I think there is always a big gap between the practice of law and running the business of law. And like you said, the right person needs to be in love with the profession to have the right aptitude for it as well. What have you seen make the difference between the lawyers that just getting by and the ones that are both getting interesting cases and also thriving in the business of law?
Well, there's a number of lawyers making a lot of money who are not that passionate about the law. They just have become really good at marketing
Hmm.
and they run sort of a machine where they bring in a lot of cases and turn them over for less than full value. And they're really not serving the public well or their individual clients very well. And so those lawyers are motivated, I think, by the thrill of running a business effectively, by,
Hmm.
what's the next marketing strategy? How are we going to get more cases? How are we going to grow? What's our growth strategy for this year? And all of these things. Um, you know, some of them are making tremendous amounts of money. And if that's what motivates you, well, fine. I don't think that ultimately that is what is satisfying in life.
Hmm.
You can buy another car, but that doesn't really bring you a lot of happiness ultimately. So I think, my advice to people that want to do that, if that's what you're into, then I really, I don't have much comment on it. If that's what you enjoy, if you like running a business, well, maybe you can go into some other business, but I think it does take away from the profession, what used to be a very honored profession. I think
Hmm.
it does diminish us all a little bit, I think, when
Hmm.
there are these big advertiser machines that are out there churning thousands of cases over. And I don't think it helps us with the public. I don't think it helps serve the public. I don't think it helps the individual client. But it's the way of the world now. So you know, I,
I had a guest on recently, and she's also a tremendous litigator, and she said something very similar, is that those advertising lawyers, they focus on the volume and they don't even try to go for trial. They try to do a quick settlement so that they get more money out of the case than it costs them to get the case signed, and they move on to the next one. sure, it works as a business model, but to your point, it does disservice to the public, and it doesn't have that impact where you change it, legislation or regulations and prevent more injuries and more catastrophic things from happening in the future by doing it properly.
Right. Yeah. Each client is a human being, and each client, it's easy for someone else to look at someone else with a broken arm and say, well, it's just a broken arm, big deal,
Hmm.
But for the person with the broken arm, you know, for one person, it might not be that big a deal. But for another person, it might really disrupt their life. It might really affect the way they feel about themselves. It might limit the way it heals might not be so good, and maybe they end up with some permanent pain or limitation in that arm. Maybe it affects the activities that they enjoy the most in life, and they can't do them the same way, or maybe they have to avoid them in the future. Maybe it affects their relationship with their family and how they interact, and just their
Hmm.
self-esteem. When they're out, they're just not quite as in a happy a mood and good a mood, and it just reverberations through your life sometimes with a relatively modest injury can be more profound than I think people give it credit for. And certainly with a serious injury, something much more serious than a broken arm, the impacts are profound. And if you don't have a lawyer who's truly committed to go all the way to, really devote the resources and the time to get you the full compensation that you need, you may, 10 years from now, you run out of the resources that you need to take care of yourself. And then who takes care of you? The public has to take care of you. The taxpayer has to take care of you. Well, I'd rather see the wrongdoer have to pay for that. The person that caused that injury, whether it's the trucking company or the insurance company that represents the negligent driver or the drunk driver or whatever it is,
Hmm.
I'd rather that they be paying rather than the taxpayer. And so, I think there's a public good to having people fully compensated and having attorneys that are willing to go all the way, go to the mat and force the
Hmm.
wrongdoer to pay full compensation.
Do you think some of the lawyers in the space could do more to help the public be better informed in how to choose the lawyer? So the public can understand who is going to represent them. Is it going to be somebody who just looks to make quick return on advertising from bringing the case in, or somebody, like you said,
Well,
that will go to the mat?
I, I think it's very difficult nowadays. Up until 1977, their advertising was prohibited.
Hmm.
And then a Supreme Court case said it was a First Amendment issue, and that's kind of what started the whole thing. And so now it's very difficult for the consumer to figure out who the most qualified lawyer is. And they can go to Chat GPT or
Hmm.
whatever, or they can just, do a organic search on Google. And the big advertisers come up
Hmm.
first because they're spending $1 million or more per year having ways that everything feeds into their website and their credibility scores and everything else, including on AI. And even they may not even be the most credible or accomplished,
Hmm.
but the people that are more small time but highly accomplished and very good might be on page 7 of Google. Nobody finds them.
Right.
So it ends up being, maybe you get referred cases, which is often the way that the better lawyers get cases is through referral. But
Hmm.
it's a very different business than it used to be. It's very difficult for the consumer to find the right lawyer, and very difficult for the good lawyer to figure out how to reach the public and let the public know that they should be contacting them. I just think it's such a competitive
Hmm.
marketplace now that unless you're willing to spend a few $1 million a year on marketing, you're kind of left in the dust.
It's certainly gotten more competitive, and with the work that we are doing, we absolutely see that. And it's not something that you can have half measures in. It's either the firm needs to be committed, and to, just like in racing or climbing Mount Everest, you can't half attempt it. You need to do it properly, or it will not work out. So that's definitely seems to be the trend. What have you seen as maybe things that have improved over time for the legal profession, whether it's maybe technology or something else that throughout your career you've seen as a upside?
Before I answer that, I want to make sure that nobody thinks I climbed Mount Everest. I didn't, but I did do trekking around Everest, and I did do some mountaineering. I have climbed some lesser peaks in that
Mm-hmm.
area and around in the U.S. And so, I do enjoy that kind of thing. The world has really changed with, when I first started, we had word processors were really in their infancy. Word processors came in really into our firm when we started getting into math. At one time, I had the largest firm in the Western U.S., the old Cartwright firm, and we had um, we were the first firm in the West Coast to get into asbestos litigation,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately getting into a few thousand cases. That would have been impossible without the benefit of word processing. And when I say word processing, it was very primitive compared to what you think of today. We had giant memory disks that were like 2.5 feet wide.
Mm-hmm.
And, it took a whole giant room to store this data. And we had another whole room dedicated to the machine itself, which took up a lot of space and, looked like something out of one of those old movies
Mm-hmm.
with the computers that just had one little green screen, but all the machinery that
Right.
ran it was immense. And it cost probably the equivalent of $1 million in today's dollars to get all that stuff set up, including all the memory. And it was still primitive. And then along came computers, and it was where we've come. And now with the digital marketing and everything else and AI, there's a lot of my colleagues are really fighting against this AI thing and or resistant to it. And I'll say that when word processing came in, there were a number of judges that were concerned and thought that people should be prohibited from using word processors to produce pleadings. Pleadings are
Mm-hmm.
the legal documents that we use to file with the court. And, ultimately, it had to be allowed. You can't stop progress. But, word processors caused a lot more junk to be produced because it was so easy to pump out stuff that you didn't have to manually type, which is
Mm-hmm.
what we were doing before when I first started. And so with computers and AI, the amount of material that can be generated, in seconds is unbelievable. So, you can write a complicated letter or you get one from the other side and you can put it into AI and you can write a comprehensive response in less than a minute, and
Right.
it's pretty amazing. The downside is that you've got attorney-client privilege. There's attorneys that are getting in trouble because they're going to sort of open source AI.
Mm-hmm.
They're violating various privileges. The AI itself is hallucinating cases, making stuff up. It's using citations for cases that don't exist or
Mm-hmm.
uses a citation, but what it says about the case isn't even there. It's not true. And so really, if you're going to get into it, you need to invest in closed, proprietary systems that are specifically built for the law and that are, very accurate and can do this work. And that's not cheap. So once again, we're into long-term contracts typically, usually it's a 3-year commitment on any new little piece of
Mm-hmm.
software that you're getting for these AI tools. And there's going to be a massive shakeout in the next 5 years as to which products win. And so I think a lot of my brothers and sisters in the bar are afraid to invest in a bunch of these tools that are going to be obsolete or merged with other companies,
Mm-hmm.
God knows who, within the next year or two. And that's going to happen. I mean, we're going to end up, there's hundreds of companies now that are catering to law. And within a couple of years, there's going to be 4, 5, 6 platforms that are going to be comprehensive case management platforms that incorporate all the tools. And that'll be
Mm-hmm.
deposition summaries, live deposition analysis tools, medical summary tools, chat tools, chat with your case tools, just case management itself, email tools that
Mm-hmm.
organize everything. And it goes on and on. There's all these other little niche products that are going to be all incorporated onto one platform. So you go to your desk in the morning and you're working on one platform instead of opening all these different things like we do now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be, I think it's going to be amazing. I've got lawyers in my firm that are resistant. I've got A lot of my friends are like, no, this is like, the machines cannot replace us, and I agree, the machines cannot and will not replace the trial lawyer or even the good paralegal, because it still takes the human being to understand the human client. And
Hmm.
we're in a human business. And so while I think this can really ease the work for a lawyer and make you a lot of these drudgery sort of tasks that we do, like legal research
Hmm.
and writing, it'll give you a tremendous head start on getting a project started. You still have to do the work to complete it, put the proper work in, and make it yours. The AI can't understand, like the broken arm, the pain, the suffering, the limitation. All of that has to be understood by the attorney. The attorney has to be immersed in the case, or the paralegal, or whoever's working on the case, your trial team. They have to understand how this person's life has been impacted, be able to communicate that effectively, to basically be the advocate for that person, whether they're selling it to the mediator or the insurance adjuster, or ultimately to the judge or to the
Hmm.
jury. AI can never do that. And only really a human can do that. And so I don't think people should be afraid to embrace these tremendous new technologies. I think it's going to be really make our lives, in many ways
Hmm.
better. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I think that's a good take because the technology is always changing, and you've seen that throughout your career. It's coming whether we like it or not. It's not going to be a shortcut. It's still going to take work to adopt it and use it in the right way. But we should think that this is not something we have to do. It's something we get to do with better tools. There are better possibilities. One of the pieces of technology I want to jump back to is your early use of video simulations in your case, because I understand you've been using that before that became mainstream.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I've probably been quick to adopt new things, often too quickly. I have made investments in technology that, ended up being a waste of money over the years. But in terms of trial tools and demonstrative evidence, I think using medical illustrations and video used to be very expensive
Hmm.
to do like an animation, and I was in early, and frankly they were like almost like stick figure sort of things. They were pretty primitive, and
Hmm.
I looking back on it, I'm not so sure how helpful those things were in the case,
Hmm.
but I found it interesting to use it, and I hopefully the jury was entertained a little bit by it.
Right.
I don't, I don't, I'd have to, I don't know whether I would have gotten honest feedback from them on whether that was persuasive to them. But nowadays, you can get stuff relatively inexpensively that's truly in 3D, and the jurors can have an immersive experience with
Hmm.
goggles and almost like be in the accident or in the event as it's happening in a video reconstruction. It's really mind blowing, and I don't see if you think it's going to be helpful to win the case, I don't see why you wouldn't want to use it,
Certainly.
other than that it's an investment of money and time.
And I think probably those are the things that you need to experiment with, because if you don't try, you don't know. And sure, some things won't work out, but even from those, you probably can learn what gets the jury's attention, what's been helpful, how can you present the case differently based on what you have. So it's
Yeah, I'll,
something
I'll
that
tell
you
you
have to
what
do.
doesn't work with an animation is just like when you watch a football game and they show the replay.
Hmm.
The natural tendency for a human is to say, "Oh, I would have moved right instead of left. I would have been able to catch that ball." It's just
Mm.
easy for us to think we would have done something different. And so
Right.
you got to be really careful when you use an animation
Hmm.
that the jury's not going to find something that your client did wrong, like to
Mm.
cause the accident or could have avoided it. You've got to make sure you think it through in advance that can't be used against you in some way. So I've had that happen where I put together a video and it's like, no, I can't use it. Yeah. So
It is important to consider for sure.
yeah.
I want to touch a little bit about growing the practice and the best way to build the body of work for the younger lawyers that might not have a book of business of somebody who's referring work to them. What would you say is the best way for younger lawyers to get work without competing with the advertising done by big firms?
Well, I think there's lots of things that you need to do, and that even if you're an older lawyer like myself, I think you need to think of every circle in your life as a potential source of business. And that starts with your family and your extended family. I mean, they may eventually need a lawyer. It depends how big your family is. I've got a huge extended family, a lot of cousins. But then you've got, whatever circles, your classmates, you've got maybe you're active in your church or your parish or your synagogue, whatever it is. Maybe you're active in your community and activities. Maybe you belong to some clubs. Developing referral sources through joining organizations that are law oriented, like trial bar associations, and getting known a little bit. All of that presupposes that in the meantime, you're doing the work to develop yourself as a lawyer and developing your skills in the trial arts, and that you're developing your reputation for being successful at handling cases. And it doesn't matter if you go out and try a soft tissue case, and if you get a decent result, well, that can be very helpful to you just on the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just shows you're out trying cases and that you can win a case. And if you're doing all of these things, as you should be, you're building your contacts. Eventually, you've potentially got thousands of contacts. You've got social media, which is very inexpensive, that you can do yourself. You can do some stuff yourself on Google. You can do places if you're
Mm-hmm.
fairly technically savvy. I know some lawyers that do it themselves, and they show up in the top 5 all the time in places. So
Mm-hmm.
there's things you can do if you're willing to invest the time and understand how to do it. But building a referral base and building up some inexpensive marketing, I think you can get enough going to get your practice started. And then it's a matter of momentum.
Mm-hmm.
As you get some turnover and get some cases going, well, maybe eventually you get, a fee of $100,000 on a case, and now you can make a little investment in some actual marketing, and then that gets you some other cases, and it just builds, and pretty soon you can build up a reasonable marketing budget to actually do some legit marketing. Very hard to compete against these massive firms that some of whom are spending more than $1 million a month now.
Yes.
It's crazy. There's just no way to compete financially and that kind of at that level.
To add a little bit of hope to that, as somebody that gets to see the behind the scenes of some of the big firms advertising, big firms, they get complacent. Sometimes they don't pay as much attention to the little details as they should be. And if somebody puts in the work and they really care about the results of the clients that they are representing, there's still room to stand out and make sure that they are being found by the right clients. And even if they're not willing to spend millions a month on advertising, there are ways to do that. So there's still hope. Robert, it has been fantastic having you with us today. Where can the audience, if they want to learn more about your work, where can they learn more online?
Well, I've enjoyed having the conversation with you. If they want to reach me, it's the Cartwright Law Firm Inc. That's www.cartwrightlaw.com. That's where they can reach us in San Francisco. From there, you can find our phone number and email addresses and so forth. But that's probably the easiest way to reach us. But we're located in 4 locations over Northern California and really service all of Northern California, as well as I've had cases in most of the states at this point in my life, all over the United States. So it depends on the case, and we're happy to help out. And we work with other lawyers all the time on cases and partner up. And that's another good thing to do, is share the risk and share the work with someone else that you like to work with. Yeah, collaborate.
Thank you so much again for coming. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Alex. All right, take care.